The clock above the register flickered once, then settled. 11 p.m., December 31st, New Year's Eve. In a quiet, forgotten neighborhood on the edge of an American factory town, a small grocery store was about to close forever. Not at midnight, not after a celebration, but alone, in silence. The shelves were half empty. The floor still smelled faintly of detergent and old milk. And behind the counter stood a man who had already lost almost everything. He didn't know it yet, but in less than 1 hour, someone would knock on his door, and that knock would change his life forever. Before we continue, take a moment and tell us in the comments. Where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? And if you believe that faith still matters in a broken world, subscribe to the YouTube channel Heaven Walks With Us for more stories like this. His name was Robert Hale. Everyone in the neighborhood just called him Rob. At 49 years old, Rob looked older than he was supposed to. His hair had gone gray years too early. The deep lines on his face weren't from age. They were from worry, from nights without sleep, from doing math over and over again that never worked in his favor. Rob slowly wiped down the wooden counter of Hale's Market, the same way he had done every night for 15 years. Except tonight, it was the last time. Tomorrow morning, January 1st, his suppliers would arrive. If he couldn't pay what he owed, they would take everything. The shelves, the refrigerators, the freezers, even the register. And if he tried to stop them, the lawsuit would finish what poverty had already started. Rob swallowed hard and looked around the store. This place had been his father's before it was his. He remembered being 8 years old, standing on a milk crate so he could reach the counter, pretending to ring up customers while his father laughed from the back room. He remembered learning the smell of bread before dawn, the hum of the old refrigerators, the way neighbors would talk for hours like the store was their living room. This store wasn't just a business, it was a life. And now, it was dying. Rob reached under the counter and pulled out a worn black ledger. The cover was cracked, the pages soft from years of being touched. He didn't need to open it to know what was inside. He already knew the number, $86,000. That was how much his customers owed him. Money he would never see. Mothers who bought milk on credit because their paychecks were late. Fathers who promised to catch up next week. Families who came in embarrassed, whispering, asking for just a little more time. Rob had written every name down, every amount, every promise, and every time he told himself the same thing. They'll pay me when they can. They never did. Because they couldn't. Behind the counter, the door to the back room creaked open. "Dad?" Rob turned. His son, Ethan, stood there in a hoodie that was too thin for winter, 14 years old. Too old to cry, too young to carry the weight he was already carrying. Are you really closing tomorrow?" Ethan asked. Rob didn't answer right away. He hated this part. "Yeah," he finally said. "I am." Ethan's jaw tightened. He nodded like he understood, even though he didn't. No 14-year-old should have to. "What about Emma?" Ethan asked quietly. Emma was Rob's daughter. 17, smart, brilliant. The kind of student teachers remembered years later. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to save people the way she couldn't save her mother. 2 weeks earlier, Rob had gone with Emma to the bank. He still remembered the man in the suit, the polite smile, the careful words, high risk, insufficient income. Too much outstanding debt. They had denied the loan in less than 10 minutes. Rob closed his eyes. "God will provide, Con," he said automatically. The words felt thin in his mouth. Ethan looked down at the floor. "Mom used to say that," he whispered. That was the moment Rob almost broke. His wife, Laura, had died 3 years earlier. Cancer. The kind that doesn't wait. The kind that doesn't care if you pray or beg or promise to change everything. Even when the pain had been unbearable, Laura never lost her faith. "God hasn't left us, Rob," she had said from her hospital bed. "Even if it feels dark, He's still here." Tonight, standing in a half-empty store with eviction papers folded in his pocket, Rob didn't feel God anywhere. He only felt tired. Go home, Rob told his son softly. Stay with your sister. I'll be there soon. I can help. I know, Rob said. But I need a minute alone. Ethan hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged his father tightly. Too tightly. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered. Rob held him back. You have nothing to be sorry for. After Ethan left, the store felt even emptier. Rob turned off the front lights. Only the yellow bulb in the back stayed on, casting long shadows across the aisles. Outside, fireworks popped in the distance. Someone, somewhere, was celebrating. Rob sat on the small stool behind the counter and opened the ledger. Name after name, debt after debt. Each line was a story. Each number was a family. Laura, he whispered into the empty air. I tried. His hands shook as he closed the book. God, he said out loud, his voice barely more than breath. I don't understand this. I don't know why it ends like this. But please, please watch over my kids. He stood up and reached for the light switch. Just one more second, and it would all be over. Then, knock, knock. Rob froze. The sound came from the front door. No one knocked this late. Not here. Not anymore. He turned slowly toward the glass. Outside, under the flickering streetlight, stood a man, thin, shivering, waiting. And for reasons Rob couldn't explain, his heart began to pound. Rob didn't open the door right away. He stood still behind the counter, staring at the man outside through the dusty glass. The streetlight above flickered, bathing the sidewalk in a weak yellow glow. For a moment, Rob wondered if exhaustion was playing tricks on his eyes. The man looked hollow, not just thin, but emptied out, like life itself had slowly been drained from him. His shoulders slumped forward as if the weight of the world pressed down on them. His jacket was too large, hanging loosely from his frame, and his hands were shoved deep into his pockets, trembling slightly. Rob glanced at the clock again. 11:02 p.m. Every instinct told him the same thing. You're closed. You don't owe anyone anything anymore. Don't open that door. Tomorrow. Nothing would matter anyway. Yet his feet didn't move. Instead, his mind drifted, uninvited, back through the years. Back to the beginning of the end. When Laura got sick, Rob had tried to keep the store running like nothing was wrong. He worked longer hours, slept less, skipped meals. He told himself he could outrun the bills if he just worked harder. But sickness doesn't care how hard you work. Medical copays piled up. Prescriptions drained what little savings they had. Rob started letting customers buy on credit more often. Neighbors who had known him for years, people who prayed with him at church, families who promised to pay when things got better. Things never did. After Laura died, the world didn't stop. The rent didn't pause. The suppliers didn't lower their prices. The bank didn't forgive interest because he was grieving. And the neighborhood, it got poorer. The factory on the east side closed. Then the warehouse. Then the trucking company downsized. Every week, someone new came into the store with the same look on their face. Shame. Just until Friday. Rob, I swear I'll pay you back. My kids haven't eaten since yesterday. And every time, Rob heard Laura's voice in his head. If we have food and someone else doesn't, what are we supposed to do? So he wrote their names in the ledger, again, and again, and again. The ledger grew thicker. The shelves grew thinner. And Rob's debt grew heavier. A sudden car drove past outside, its headlights briefly illuminating the man at the door. For a split second, Rob caught a clearer glimpse of his face. The man looked terrified. Not of Rob, of being turned away. Rob exhaled slowly. He thought of Ethan and Emma at home, sitting in the dark living room, pretending they weren't scared. Pretending they didn't hear the whispers at school. Pretending they didn't notice when the fridge got emptier. He thought of the supplier's warning from 2 days ago. January 1st, and the man had said over the phone, voice cold and professional, either you pay what you owe, or we take inventory. No exceptions. Rob owed $47,000, money he didn't have, money he would never get in one night. Rob clenched his fists. If I give anything else away, he thought, I'm stealing from my own kids. The knock came again. Knock. Knock. Softer this time. Almost apologetic. Rob finally walked toward the door. Up close, the glass revealed more details. The man's cheeks were sunken. His lips cracked. His eyes, dark and deep, flickered with something Rob recognized instantly. Hunger. Not the kind that makes your stomach growl. The kind that makes your bones ache. Rob rested his hand on the lock but didn't turn it yet. What do you want? He asked through the door. The man's head lifted slightly, relief flashing across his face at the sound of a human voice. I'm sorry to bother you, the man said quietly. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used much lately. I know you're closed. I don't know where else to go. Rob swallowed. Stores are closed, he replied. Everything's closed. I know, the man said quickly. I checked. All of them. That alone sent a chill through Rob. All of them. How long has it been? Rob asked before he could stop himself. The man hesitated. 3 days, he said. Since my kids had a real meal. Rob felt something twist in his chest. How many? He asked. 4, the man answered. The youngest is 2. 2. Rob pictured Emma at 2 years old, sitting on Laura's lap, hands sticky with apple juice. He remembered how Laura would panic if Emma skipped even one meal. His fingers tightened around the door handle. Where are you staying? Rob asked. Wherever we can, the man said. Right now, a room someone lets us use. Rob nodded slowly. This was exactly how it always started. Exactly. Another name. Another number. Another debt. Another reason his store was dying. Yet something about this moment felt heavier than the others. Rob looked back at the counter. The ledger sat there, closed, silent, waiting. He imagined tomorrow morning. The shelves stripped bare, the sign taken down, the doors locked for good. If he didn't open this door, the store would still close. If he did, the store would still close. There was no version of tonight where he won, except maybe one. Rob closed his eyes for half a second. Then he turned the lock. The click echoed louder than it should have in the empty store. He pulled the door open. Come in, he said quietly. The man stepped inside, clutching his jacket like he didn't quite believe the door was real. And Rob had no idea that by opening it, he had just opened his life to something far bigger than money. The door closed behind the man with a soft click. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The grocery store felt smaller with another person inside it. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder. The yellow light in the back cast long shadows that stretched across the floor like silent witnesses. The man stood near the entrance, unsure where to put his feet, as if afraid to step too far into a space he didn't belong in. Rob gestured toward the aisles. Take what you need on, he said, his voice steady in a way he didn't feel. Just the basics. The man nodded quickly, too quickly. Yes, sir. Thank you, he said. Thank you so much. He moved slowly down the first aisle, eyes scanning the shelves like someone trying not to hope too much. He reached for a gallon of milk, hesitated, then carefully placed it into a plastic basket. Rob watched him. Every movement felt deliberate, respectful, almost reverent. Bread, rice, beans, eggs. Nothing extra, nothing indulgent. Rob leaned back against the counter and exhaled through his nose. This is it, he thought. This is why I'm here. He reached under the counter and pulled out the black ledger. The cover felt heavier than it should have. He opened it. Page after page stared back at him. Names written in his own handwriting, each one a quiet confession. Mrs. Alvarez, $420. Thomas Reed, $180. The Johnson family, $30,150. Some pages had notes scribbled in the margins. Lost job, sick child, promised to pay next month. Next month had come and gone. Rob turned another page. His brother's voice echoed in his head. You're not a charity, Rob. You're running a business. Stop giving credit or close the doors. At the time, Rob had nodded, promised he'd change. He never did, because every time he looked into the eyes of someone asking for food, the rules of business stopped making sense. The man returned to the counter carrying 2 full bags now, carefully tied at the top. His hands were still shaking. "I tried not to take too much," he said quickly. "Just enough for tonight and tomorrow, if that's okay." Rob nodded. "How much is it?" the man asked. Rob did the math in his head. Milk, eggs, bread, rice, beans, canned soup. He didn't need a calculator. "About $45, he said. The man winced, like the number physically hurt him. "I'll pay you back," he said immediately. "I swear I will. As soon as I find work." Rob picked up his pen. "What's your name?" he asked. The man hesitated. "Daniel," he said after a second. "Daniel Cruz." Rob wrote it down. "Daniel Cruz, $45. Deck 31. Just like that. Another line, another promise, another debt. Rob closed the ledger and slid it back under the counter. The man looked at him with wide eyes. "You didn't even ask where I work," Daniel said. "Or where I'm from." Rob shrugged slightly. "It wouldn't change the fact that your kids are hungry," he replied. Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. Rob gave a tired smile. "Take care of your kids," he said. "That's enough." Daniel picked up the bags, holding them tightly, like they might disappear if he loosened his grip. "God bless you," he said quietly. Rob didn't respond right away. He watched as Daniel walked toward the door, paused, then stepped out into the cold night. The streetlight flickered again as the door closed behind him. Rob locked the door this time. He leaned his forehead against the glass for a moment, feeling the chill seep into his skin. That was the last one, he told himself. No more. He turned back toward the store. The ledger sat under the counter, silent and heavy, holding the weight of 15 years of mercy. Rob walked back behind the counter and sat down on the stool. His legs felt weak. Outside, fireworks cracked loudly now. Midnight was getting closer. Somewhere, people were counting down, laughing, making resolutions they didn't know they'd break. Rob stared at the register. Empty, completely empty. He opened it anyway, as if something might have magically appeared in the last 5 minutes. Nothing. A hollow laugh escaped his throat. "Happy New Year," he muttered. He reached down and pulled the ledger out one more time. Why did he keep doing this? Why couldn't he say no? Rob flipped through the pages slowly. Faces filled his mind as he read each name. A woman crying quietly while asking for baby formula. A man with one leg who worked construction when he could. Kids in torn jackets pretending not to be cold. Rob pressed his lips together. If I had been tougher, he thought, maybe the store would still be alive. He closed the ledger with a sharp snap. "I did my best," he said aloud to the empty store. "I really did." He stood up and reached for the light switch. The store was quiet again. Too quiet. Then, from outside, fast footsteps, running. Rob froze, his hand still hovering near the switch. The door rattled. Someone grabbed the handle, and before Rob could react, the lock clicked from the outside. The door burst open. Daniel stood there, breathing hard, but something about him was different now. Very different. The bags of food were gone, and the look in his eyes made Rob's heart begin to race. Rob didn't move. For a brief, irrational second, he thought maybe he'd forgotten to lock the door. Maybe this was all still normal. Maybe exhaustion was making everything feel heavier than it was. But he knew he had locked it. Daniel stood in the doorway, chest rising and falling fast, breath fogging in the cold air. The streetlight outside flickered again, and for a moment his shadow stretched unnaturally long across the floor of the store. "You forgot something?" Rob asked carefully. Daniel didn't answer right away. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, gently this time. Too gently for someone who had just been running. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. His voice sounded different, clearer, stronger. "I didn't mean to scare you." Rob noticed then what had set his nerves on edge. Daniel's hands weren't shaking anymore. Neither was his voice. "What happened to the bags?" Rob asked. Daniel glanced toward the window, as if checking something outside. "They're where they need to be," he said. Rob frowned. "What does that mean?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, his eyes drifted around the store, slowly, deliberately taking in the shelves, the counter, the register, and then they stopped. On the counter, on the place where the ledger usually sat, Rob felt his stomach tighten. "Did you forget something else?" Rob asked again, more firmly this time. Daniel looked back at him. "Yes," he said. "I forgot to ask you something important." Rob crossed his arms. "About what?" Daniel took a step closer to the counter, then another. "How much do they owe you?" he asked quietly. Rob blinked. "I'm sorry? The people you give credit to," Daniel clarified. "How much do they owe you, in total?" The question hit Rob like a slap. "That's none of your business," he replied sharply. Daniel nodded slowly, as if he had expected that response. "I understand," he said. "But I'd like to know." Rob felt irritation rise, sharp and sudden. "Listen," he said. "I helped you. I didn't have to. If this is about—" "It's not about me," Daniel interrupted gently. That stopped Rob cold. Silence stretched between them. Outside, another firework exploded, briefly lighting the store through the dusty windows. For a split second, Daniel's face looked different in the flash, older, maybe, or calmer. Rob couldn't tell. "How did you even get back in?" Rob demanded. "The door was locked." Daniel glanced at the handle. "Some doors open when they're meant to," he said. Rob felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Who are you?" Rob asked. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward the counter. "The book," he said. "You keep it there." Rob's heart skipped. "You shouldn't know that," he said slowly. "I know," Daniel replied. Rob stared at him, searching for something, fear, deception, guilt. He found none. "How much?" Daniel asked again. Rob hesitated. He didn't know why he answered. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something deeper, something that had been waiting for this moment. $86,000, Rob said quietly. Daniel nodded, as if confirming a number he already knew. "And how much do you owe?" he asked. Rob's throat went dry. $47,000, he replied. "Suppliers." Daniel stepped fully behind the counter now, standing where Rob usually stood. "You were going to close tonight," Daniel said. Rob stiffened. "How do you know that?" "Because you prayed," Daniel replied simply. Rob's breath caught. "I didn't pray out loud," he said. Daniel met his eyes. "Yes, you did," he said softly. "You just didn't realize it." Rob felt suddenly dizzy. "Who told you my name?" he asked. "I never said it." Daniel smiled faintly. "Rob," he said, speaking his name as if it belonged in his mouth. "You've carried a lot alone." Rob took an involuntary step back. "That's enough," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't know what game you're playing, but—" "There's no game," Daniel said. "Only truth." He reached toward the drawer under the counter. Rob reacted instantly. "Don't touch that," he snapped. Daniel stopped, his hand hovering inches from the wood. "May I?" he asked, not like a request, but like an invitation. Every instinct screamed at Rob to say no, but his mouth opened anyway. "Why?" Daniel looked at him, not with judgment, not with pity, but with something that felt uncomfortably like understanding. "Because those debts," he said, "matter more than you realize." Rob's legs felt weak. Slowly, against every ounce of common sense, he pulled the drawer open. The ledger lay inside, black, worn, heavy. Daniel placed his hand on the cover. The moment his fingers touched it, the air in the store changed. The hum of the refrigerators faded into the background. The yellow light seemed brighter somehow, sharper. Rob felt pressure in his ears, like standing too close to something powerful. "Read me a name," Daniel said. Rob swallowed. "Why?" "Just one," Daniel replied. Rob flipped the ledger open with trembling hands. "Maria Lopez," he read. $820. Daniel nodded. "Widow," he said. "2 kids. Cleans offices at night. Skips meals so they don't have to." Rob's knees buckled. "How do you know that?" he whispered. Daniel turned the page. "James Miller," he continued. 3,100. Laid off last winter. Lives in his truck." Rob dropped the ledger. It hit the floor with a loud thud. "No," Rob said, backing away. "This isn't possible." Daniel bent down, picked up the book, and placed it gently on the counter. "Nothing you've done," he said quietly, "has gone unnoticed." Rob looked at the clock. 11:23 p.m. Less than 40 minutes until midnight. Less than 40 minutes until everything was supposed to end. Daniel rested his hand on the ledger. "Rob," he said, his voice calm and steady, "there are accounts that can't be settled with money." And as he spoke those words, Rob saw something he would never forget. A faint glow began to seep from between the pages of the book. Rob couldn't breathe. The light wasn't blinding, not yet, but it was unmistakable. A soft white glow seeped from between the pages of the ledger, like embers glowing beneath ashes. It pulsed gently, almost rhythmically, as if the book itself were alive. "No," Rob whispered. "No, no, no." He staggered backward and hit the shelf behind him. A can of soup rolled off and clattered loudly onto the floor, the sound snapping through the silence like a gunshot. Daniel didn't flinch. He stood perfectly still, one hand resting on the ledger, his face calm in a way that made Rob's fear spike even higher. "This isn't happening," Rob said, shaking his head violently. "I'm exhausted. I haven't slept. I'm imagining this." He rubbed his eyes hard and looked again. The light was still there, stronger now. It spilled across the counter, crawling over the wood grain, illuminating dust motes in the air. The yellow bulb in the back suddenly felt unnecessary, weak in comparison. Rob felt pressure in his chest, like something heavy was sitting on his heart. "Please," he said hoarsely. "Stop." Daniel looked at him. "Why?" he asked gently. "Because I can't take this," Rob said. "I've already lost everything. I can't lose my mind too." Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he opened the ledger. The pages turned on their own, one after another. Rob watched, frozen, as ink began to shift. He saw it clearly. Where it had once read "Os," the letters blurred, dissolved, and reformed. "Paid." Rob's breath hitched. "No," he said again, but the word had no strength left in it. The pages continued to turn. Maria Lopez, 820 on. Paid James Miller, $3,100. Paid next to each word. A single letter appeared. A simple mark. J. Rob slid down the shelf and collapsed onto the floor. "This is impossible," he whispered. "These are real people. These are real debts." Daniel knelt down in front of him, his eyes level with Rob's. "You carried them as if they were yours," he said. "PM. So they were." The ledger flipped faster now. Name after name, debt after debt, all of them changing, all of them erased. Rob felt tears streaming down his face, but he couldn't tell when they'd started. "I failed," he sobbed. "I failed my kids. I failed this store. I failed everyone." Daniel shook his head slowly. "You fed the hungry," he said. "You kept doors open when others closed them. You chose mercy when it cost you everything." The ledger stopped turning. The glow intensified. Rob could barely look at it now. The light filled the store, bouncing off the metal shelves, reflecting in the glass doors of the refrigerators. Outside, fireworks exploded again, but Rob didn't hear them. All he heard was his own heartbeat. Daniel closed the book gently. The light dimmed, but it didn't disappear. Rob stared at the cover. Every debt, every name, gone. How much? Rob whispered. All of it, Daniel replied. Rob let out a broken laugh. That's over $80,000, he said. That doesn't just disappear. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. Debts disappear all the time, he said. Just not the way you expect. Rob's mind raced. This doesn't fix tomorrow, he said desperately. The suppliers, the lawsuit, I still lose everything. Daniel stood up. Do you? He asked. He turned toward the register. Rob followed his gaze, confusion mixing with dread. That register has been empty for months, Rob said. There's nothing there. Daniel placed his hand on the cold metal. The air shifted again. Not light this time, but sound. A sound Rob hadn't heard in a long time. Paper. Money. Rob's head snapped up. No, he breathed. The register drawer slid open by itself. Rob stared. Stacks of bills filled the compartments. Neat, orderly, real. Hundreds pressed against hundreds. Thousands upon thousands. Rob crawled forward on his hands and knees. He reached out, trembling, and touched one. It didn't vanish. It didn't fade. It was solid, real. How much is that? Rob whispered, afraid of the answer. Daniel looked at him. Enough, and he said, to pay what you owe, to breathe again, to begin. Rob broke. He buried his face in his hands and wept, not quietly, not politely, but with the kind of sobs that come from years of buried fear and shame finally being released. I don't deserve this, he choked. After everything, after failing so badly. Daniel stepped closer. He placed a hand on Rob's shoulder. The warmth that spread through Rob's body wasn't physical. It was deeper. It reached places grief had lived untouched for years. Grace, Daniel said softly, is never deserved. Rob looked up at him through tears. Who are you? He asked. Daniel smiled. Not fully. Not yet. The clock on the wall clicked. 11:31 p.m. Less than 30 minutes until midnight. Less than 30 minutes until the truth would no longer be hidden. Rob's hands wouldn't stop shaking. The warmth from Daniel's hands still lingered on his shoulder, steady, grounding, yet nothing about this moment felt grounded in reality anymore. The money in the register was real. The ledger was real. And yet everything Rob thought he knew about the world was collapsing in on itself. Who are you? Rob asked again, his voice barely audible. Daniel didn't answer right away. He stepped back, creating a small distance between them. The glow in the store softened, retreating from the shelves and walls, as if the light itself were holding its breath. Outside, fireworks exploded louder now. Voices in the distance shouted countdowns, laughter echoing down the street. 11:33. Daniel looked toward the window. They're celebrating the new year, he said quietly. Rob followed his gaze. Mine was supposed to end tonight, Rob whispered. Daniel turned back to him. Ending, he said, are not always what they appear to be. Rob swallowed. I'm not a good man, he said suddenly. I lost the store. I couldn't protect my family. I let everything fall apart. Daniel's eyes softened. You confuse success with faithfulness, hon, he said. Rob frowned. What does that mean? Daniel walked slowly toward the ledger and opened it again. The pages no longer glowed, but they were changed. Every line marked paid. You kept feeding people when it cost you everything, Daniel said. You chose compassion when the world told you to choose survival. That made me weak, Rob said bitterly. Daniel shook his head. No, he replied. It made you like me. The words sent a jolt through Rob's chest. What do you mean? Like you? Rob asked. Daniel lifted his hands. Rob's breath caught in his throat. There, clearly visible in the soft light, were scars, perfectly round, centered in each palm. Rob felt the room spin. No, he whispered, backing away. That's not possible. Daniel took a step closer. When you fed the hungry, he said gently, you fed me? Rob's knees gave out. He fell to the floor, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. I know those words, Rob said, his voice breaking. I've heard them before. Daniel knelt down in front of him. Yes, he said. You have. Rob squeezed his eyes shut. I was hungry, and you gave me food. The verse surfaced in his mind, uninvited and undeniable. When you welcomed the stranger, Daniel continued, you welcomed me. Rob opened his eyes. Daniel's appearance was changing, not suddenly, not violently, but undeniably. The gauntness faded. Strength returned to his frame. The torn jacket became something else entirely. White, radiant, alive with light that seemed to come from within rather than from around him. Rob sobbed openly now. It can't be Anna, he said. I didn't recognize you. Daniel smiled. You weren't meant to, he said. Faith does not require recognition, only obedience. Rob crawled forward on trembling hands. Lord, he whispered, the word escaping him before his mind could catch up. The warmth intensified as Daniel took Rob's hands in his own. The scars were real, so was the peace. Rob felt something deep inside him break open. Years of grief, guilt, and self-blame pouring out like a flood. I thought you abandoned us, Rob cried. After Laura died, after everything fell apart, Daniel's grip tightened, not painfully, but firmly. I never left, he said. I was with you in every act of mercy, in every meal you gave away, in every night you stayed open when you had every reason to close. Rob shook his head, overwhelmed. I gave those people food, he said, but I lost everything. Daniel leaned closer. You lost nothing that mattered, he replied. You gained souls. Rob looked up, tears blurring his vision. Souls? He echoed. Daniel nodded. 317 family, he said. Each one touched by love when they expected rejection. Rob's breath hitched. I just wrote numbers in a book, he said. And I wrote their names in eternity, Daniel replied. The words landed heavier than any weight Rob had ever carried. I still owe money, Rob said weakly. I still don't know how to start again. Daniel gestured toward the register. What you owed has been paid, he said. And what you need has been provided. Rob hesitated. I can't accept this, he said. It's too much. Daniel's eyes held his. Grace, he said again, is not accepted because it is small. It is accepted because it is given. The clock ticked. 11:44 p.m. Daniel stood and walked toward the door. Wait, Rob said urgently. What happens now? Daniel paused at the threshold and turned back. Now, he said, you live the truth you already know. Rob struggled to his feet. Will I see you again? He asked. Daniel smiled, fully this time. You already have, he said. Every time someone knocks on your door hungry. The light around him intensified once more, filling the store, spilling through the windows, washing over the street outside. Rob raised his arm to shield his eyes. When the light faded, Daniel was gone. The store was silent again. Only the ledger on the counter. Only the register full of money. Only Rob, standing in a place that would never be ordinary again. The clock clicked. 11:59 p.m. The final second of the year slipped away, and as midnight arrived, Rob understood something with absolute clarity. The night he thought was the end was the night everything truly began. Rob didn't sleep. He tried, he truly did. But every time he closed his eyes, the image returned. The scars, the light, the warmth that still seemed to live under his skin. So he stayed in the store. The same stool. The same counter. The same walls. Yet nothing felt the same anymore. At 12:07 a.m., Rob opened the register again. The money was still there. He counted slowly, deliberately, forcing himself to breathe between stacks. Once, twice, 3 times. His hands shook so badly he had to stop and sit down. When he finished, the number didn't change. Enough to pay every supplier, enough to restock the shelves, enough to keep the lights on, enough to breathe. At 1:15 a.m., He opened the ledger again. Every page told the same impossible story. Names he knew by heart, debts he had memorized. All marked paid, each one sealed with the same simple letter, J. At 2:40 a.m., Rob locked the register, turned off the lights, and finally walked home. The streets were quiet now. Firework debris littered the sidewalks. The celebration had passed, leaving behind silence and cold air. His house was dark except for the living room light. Emma and Ethan were sitting on the couch. They jumped to their feet the moment Rob opened the door. "Dad," Emma said, "where have you been? It's almost 3. Rob closed the door behind him. "I need you both to sit down," he said quietly. They did. He stood there for a moment, staring at his children, their tired eyes, their worry, the way they were bracing themselves for bad news. "I'm going to tell you something," Rob said, "and I need you to listen all the way through before you decide I've lost my mind." Ethan swallowed. "Right. Okay," Rob began. He told them everything. The knock, the man, the food, the questions, the ledger, the light, the scars, the register. He spoke slowly, carefully, watching their faces change, confusion giving way to disbelief, disbelief giving way to something else. When he finished, the room was silent. Emma was the first to speak. "Dad," she said gently, "are you sure you weren't just exhausted?" Rob nodded. "I thought that too," he said. He reached into his coat pocket and placed the folded note on the table, the one he hadn't even realized he was holding until he got home. Emma unfolded it. Her breath caught. Ethan leaned over her shoulder, reading. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Emma looked up, tears filling her eyes. "The handwriting," she whispered. "It's perfect." Rob nodded. "It was him," he said simply. Ethan shook his head slowly. "So, what happens now?" Rob didn't know how to answer that yet. At 7:03 a.m., Rob's phone rang. The screen lit up with a name he hadn't wanted to see. Mason & Co. Distribution, his main supplier. Rob answered. "Rob Hale," he said. There was a pause on the other end. Then, "Rob," the voice said. "I don't understand what's going on." Rob closed his eyes. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. "We just received a wire transfer," the man said. "Full amount, $47,000, cleared." Rob felt his knees weaken. "Cleared?" he echoed. "Yes," the man said. "No delay, no flags. It came from an anonymous account. The memo just says, 'Payment for Hale's Market. Account settled.'" Rob looked at the clock. 7:05 a.m. The timing was almost exact. The supplier hesitated. "Rob, I need to know, was this you?" Rob swallowed. "No," he said truthfully. "But it was paid." There was silence on the line. Finally, the man spoke again. His tone completely changed. "Then we'll see you at 8, he said. "To restock." The call ended. Rob sat down heavily on the couch. Emma covered her mouth with her hands. Ethan let out a breath he'd been holding for weeks. "It's real," Emma whispered. "It's actually real." Rob nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "It is." Outside, the sun began to rise. A new year, a new morning. And for the first time in a very long time, Rob didn't wake up afraid. He didn't know exactly what the future held. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. When the door had opened the night before, he hadn't just let a stranger in, he had let hope back into his life. Rob unlocked the store at 7:58 a.m. He paused with his hand still on the door handle, listening. For 15 years, opening this door had meant responsibility, pressure, fear. This morning, it meant something else. Possibility. The bell above the door chimed softly as he stepped inside. The store smelled the same, cleaner, old wood, faint traces of bread. But Rob felt different standing there. Lighter, as if something heavy had finally been lifted off his chest. At exactly 8:02, the first delivery truck pulled up. Rob watched from the window as the driver stepped down, clipboard in hand. This was the moment he'd replayed in his nightmares for weeks. Men walking in, pointing at shelves, taking everything. Instead, the driver smiled. "Morning, Rob," he said. "Happy New Year." "Happy New Year," Rob replied, still half expecting the ground to disappear beneath his feet. Boxes came in, one by one. Milk, bread, rice, canned goods, fresh produce. The shelves began to fill again. By 10 a.m., the store looked alive. Not perfect, not full, but alive. Word spread quickly. By noon, the first customers began to trickle in. Neighbors who hadn't visited in weeks because they knew Rob was struggling and didn't want to ask for more credit. Mrs. Alvarez came first. She stopped just inside the door, looking around as if she were stepping into a place she wasn't sure still existed. "Rob?" she asked softly. "I'm here," he said. She walked up to the counter, clutching her purse with both hands. I heard you were closing," she said. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." Rob nodded. "You don't owe me anything," he said gently. Mrs. Alvarez froze. "I still owe you," she insisted. 800 and... "You don't," Rob interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "Your account is settled." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand." Rob smiled softly. "That's okay," he said. "Neither did I, at first." She left the store crying, this time not from shame, but from relief. Then came James Miller. Then the Johnson family. One by one, people came in carrying the same burden, expecting the same conversation they'd always had, and one by one, Rob told them the same thing. "You don't owe me anymore." Some argued, some laughed nervously, some broke down completely. By mid-afternoon, the ledger wasn't a secret anymore, not because Rob announced it, but because peace is contagious. By the end of the day, Rob realized something that startled him. He wasn't afraid anymore. Not of running out, not of giving too much, not of losing control. That fear had died the night before. Late in the afternoon, Emma came by after helping a neighbor shovel snow. She stood behind the counter, watching her father greet customers with a warmth she hadn't seen in years. "You're different," she said quietly. Rob chuckled. "So are you," he replied. She smiled. "Dad, are you really going to keep doing this?" she asked. "Giving people food when they can't pay?" Rob didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. Emma studied his face. "What if it puts us back where we were?" she asked gently. Rob leaned on the counter. "Then it puts us back where we were," he said. "But now I know we weren't alone there either." That evening, Rob took the old ledger home. He wrapped it carefully and placed it in a drawer, not to hide it, but to protect it. It wasn't a business record anymore. It was a reminder. The next morning, he bought a new notebook. The cover was plain, clean, unmarked. When Ethan saw it, he raised an eyebrow. "A new ledger?" he asked. "Yes," Rob replied. Ethan hesitated. "Aren't you afraid?" he asked. "That it'll just fill up again?" Rob smiled. "It probably will," he said. "So why keep it?" Rob opened the notebook and wrote one word at the top of the first page. Trust. "Because this time," he said, "the store isn't being carried by me alone." That week, something subtle began to happen. People started paying when they could. Not because Rob demanded it, not because he reminded them, but because they wanted to. A man who owed $40 left $50 and said nothing. A woman paid $10 a week for a debt that no longer existed. A teenager came in after school and asked if he could help stock shelves to make up for what his family took. Rob accepted it all with gratitude and without expectation. The store didn't just recover, it softened, and somehow it grew. On Friday night, Rob locked up and stood outside for a moment, looking down the street, the same street where a man had once stood shivering, afraid to knock. Rob knew something now that he hadn't known then. Faith wasn't a feeling. It was a door you chose to open, again and again, no matter how tired you were. He turned the sign to open for the next morning and whispered a simple prayer. Help me keep saying yes. It didn't happen all at once. There was no headline, no announcement, no moment when the neighborhood suddenly realized something had changed. It happened the way real change always does, quietly. The first sign came 3 days later. A man Rob barely recognized walked into the store just before closing. He wore a work jacket dusted with drywall powder, boots cracked from use. He stood near the door for a full minute, shifting his weight, clearly rehearsing something in his head. Rob, he finally said, approaching the counter. Do you have a minute? Of course, Rob replied. The man placed a folded stack of bills on the counter. There's $50 here, he said. I know you told me my debt was gone, but I couldn't sleep, not knowing. Rob looked at the money, then back at the man. You don't have to do this, he said. I know, the man replied. That's why I am. Rob accepted the bills without comment. The man nodded once, relieved, and left. The next morning, a young woman came in with her 2 children. She bought milk, cereal, and eggs. At the register, she slid an extra $5 bill across the counter. For the next family, she whispered. Rob felt his throat tighten. By the end of the week, it had become a pattern. Someone would pay a little more. Someone else would offer to help clean. Another would ask if they could volunteer an afternoon in exchange for nothing at all. No one was told to do it. They just did. The ledger, the new one, began to fill, just as Ethan had predicted. But this time, something was different. The numbers never felt heavy. They felt shared. One evening, Rob noticed something else. The argument stopped. People no longer snapped at each other in line. No one rushed. Conversations lingered. Strangers started greeting one another by name. Hales Market didn't feel like a store anymore. It felt like a place. On the following Sunday, a man Rob hadn't seen in months came through the door. His name was Carl. Carl had lost his leg in a construction accident years earlier. He did odd jobs when he could, leaned heavily on a worn cane, and carried himself like someone who had learned not to expect help. He approached the counter slowly. Rob, he said, I heard something strange. Rob smiled faintly. People say a lot of things. They say my debt's gone, Carl said. That can't be right. Rob nodded. It is. Carl stared at him. Why? He asked. Rob thought for a moment. Because someone paid a debt I couldn't, he said. And I'm passing it on. Carl swallowed hard. The next morning, Carl showed up early with his toolbox. I can't give you money, he said, but I can fix things. He spent the entire day repairing shelves, tightening loose fixtures, fixing the leaky faucet Rob had ignored for years. When he finished, he refused payment. I'm even now, he said simply. A week later, Mrs. Alvarez started bringing soup to the store on Thursdays. It's nothing fancy, she said. Just so you don't forget to eat. James Miller, the man who lived in his truck, found work through a customer he met in line. He came back 2 days later, beaming, and paid off a debt that no longer existed. I needed to know I could, he said. Something deeper was happening. People weren't just receiving mercy. They were learning how to give it. Rob noticed it most in the children. Kids who used to stare at the floor now ran through the aisles laughing. Teenagers helped elderly neighbors carry groceries. A group of middle schoolers started collecting spare change in a jar labeled, "For families who need it." No one told them to. They had simply seen it done. One evening, Emma stood behind the counter, watching the room with quiet wonder. Dad, she said, do you realize what's happening? Rob looked around. I think so, he replied. You didn't just forgive debts, she said. You changed how people see each other. Rob nodded. It wasn't me, he said. It was the door. Emma frowned slightly. The door? The night I opened it, Rob said. Everything after that was just momentum. As winter wore on, the neighborhood changed in subtle ways. Streetlights that had been broken for months were repaired. Someone reported them, someone else followed up. A local mechanic fixed cars at reduced prices for families he knew struggled. A landlord quietly forgave a late fee for a single mother who'd never asked for mercy before. Rob never preached. He never explained. He just kept opening the door. And every time someone asked why he did it, his answer stayed the same. Because someone did it for me. Late one night, as Rob locked up, he noticed a young man standing across the street. The man looked familiar. Too familiar. Thin. Nervous. Cold. Rob's heart skipped. He stepped outside. The man flinched, then looked up. "I'm sorry," the man said quickly. "I didn't mean to scare you. I needed to know if this place was real." Rob smiled. "It is," he said. The man nodded, relief washing over his face. Rob opened the door. "Come in," he said, and as the bell chimed overhead, Rob understood something with a clarity that settled deep in his bones. Miracles don't end when the light fades. They continue every time someone chooses mercy over fear. 3 years passed. Not suddenly, not miraculously, but steadily, day by day, decision by decision. By the winter of the 3rd year, Hales Market no longer looked like the place that had almost closed its doors on that cold New Year's Eve. The shelves were full now. Not overflowing, not extravagant, but complete. Fresh produce sat neatly stacked. The refrigerators hummed with quiet reliability. The old flickering bulb in the back had been replaced, though Rob kept the yellow shade out of habit, a reminder of where everything had changed. But what caught people's attention wasn't the inventory. It was the atmosphere. People lingered. They talked. They laughed. They noticed one another. On a small plaque near the entrance. Simple wood. No decoration. Were words handwritten in careful ink. "Credit is given to the hungry." Nothing more. No explanation. Visitors often stopped to read it twice. "Is that real?" they would ask. Rob would smile. "Yes," he'd say. "It is." Emma was 20 now. She stood behind the counter on weekends, books spread open between customers. Pre-med. Exhausted. Focused. Determined in the way only someone who had watched loss closely could be. Her acceptance letter had arrived 2 years earlier, not because of money, but because of grades and perseverance. A partial scholarship covered tuition. The rest, Rob paid quietly, steadily, without fear. Ethan, now 17, handled inventory with surprising precision. He tracked orders, counted stock, learned margins. But what mattered more to Rob was what Ethan learned beyond numbers. When a family came in embarrassed, whispering, Ethan didn't look at Rob for permission. He simply nodded. "Take what you need," he'd say. "We'll figure it out." Rob watched that happen for the first time and had to step into the back room to collect himself. Some lessons are better caught than taught. Every December 31st, Rob closed the store early. At 6 in the evening, Hales Market went dark, not because of loss, but because of purpose. The 3 of them loaded a rented truck with boxes. Each box was the same. Milk, bread, rice, beans, eggs, canned goods. Enough to feed a family for a week. The first year, they delivered 100 boxes. The second year, 300. This year, they delivered 1,000. They didn't announce it. They didn't advertise. They didn't record it. They knocked on doors. Sometimes the doors opened quickly. Sometimes they didn't open at all. And sometimes Rob noticed with a familiar ache. The person behind the door looked exactly like Daniel had looked that night. Thin, ashamed, afraid. Every time, Rob felt the same quiet certainty. Open the door. Word spread beyond the neighborhood. People came from across town to shop at Hales Market, not because prices were lowest, but because something felt different there. Contractors stopped in before work. Teachers came after school. Nurses picked up groceries on the way home from night shifts. The store did well, not excessively, not recklessly, but faithfully. Rob never expanded aggressively, never chased profit for its own sake. When a bank offered a loan to open a second location, he declined. Not yet, he said. He wasn't afraid of growth. He was afraid of forgetting why the door mattered. One afternoon, a man in a suit walked into the store. Expensive watch, polished shoes, eyes scanning the shelves like he was searching for something he couldn't quite name. "Are you Rob Hale?" the man asked. "I am," Rob replied. "My name is Thomas Grant," the man said. "I'm with a private foundation." Rob raised an eyebrow. Thomas smiled. "I've heard about this place," he said. "About the debts, the food, the way you operate." Rob waited. "I'd like to offer you a grant," Thomas continued. $200,000 to expand your model." Rob didn't answer right away. "Why?" he asked finally. Thomas hesitated. "Because 3 years ago," he said quietly, "my daughter was one of the people who walked out of here without paying." Rob's heart stilled. "She was ashamed," Thomas said. "She never told me. But something changed in her after that night. She started helping others, started giving, started believing again." Thomas swallowed. "I don't know what happened here," he said, "but it mattered." Rob nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. "Let me pray about it." Thomas smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." That night, Rob stood alone in the store after closing. He walked to the counter. He opened the drawer beneath it. The old ledger, wrapped carefully, protected, rested inside. He didn't open it often. But when he did, he remembered. He remembered the knock, the fear, the choice, the door. Rob closed the drawer and turned off the lights. As he locked up, a quiet thought settled into his heart, one that no longer startled him. Miracles weren't rare. They were just waiting on the other side of obedience. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late November, cold enough that breath lingered in the air, but not cold enough for snow. Hale's Market was busy in its usual, unhurried way. A few customers browsed the aisles. Ethan was restocking canned goods. Emma sat behind the counter, reviewing notes for an anatomy exam. The bell above the door chimed. Rob looked up and felt time slow. The man standing just inside the doorway didn't belong to the neighborhood. His coat was tailored. His shoes were polished. His posture carried the quiet confidence of someone who had never wondered whether he would eat that night. Yet his eyes were unsettled. He stood there longer than necessary, as if bracing himself. "Excuse me," the man said finally. "Are you Rob Hale?" Rob nodded. "I am." The man exhaled slowly. "My name is Michael Alvarez," he said. "And I believe 3 years ago, you fed my son." Rob felt something shift in his chest. "Your son," he repeated. "Yes," Michael said. "His name is Daniel." The store seemed to fade into the background. Rob gripped the edge of the counter. "I remember him," Rob said carefully. Michael nodded. "He told me everything the next morning," he continued. "About the store, about the food, about the man who opened the door when everyone else was closed." Rob didn't speak. "At the time," Michael went on, "I thought it was just a story, a desperate night, a kind stranger." He paused. "But then, something strange happened." Rob leaned forward slightly. "That morning," Michael said, "I woke up with one thought repeating in my head. Pay his debts." Rob's heart began to pound. "I didn't know your name," Michael said. "Didn't know where the store was, but I knew I had to find you." He swallowed. "I'm a business owner," he added. "I understand numbers, risk, debt." Rob nodded slowly. "So I investigated," Michael continued. "Found your suppliers, found what you owed." Rob's breath caught. "I made a transfer," Michael said. "An anonymous one, enough to clear what you owed them." The store was completely silent now. Emma had stopped writing. Ethan stood frozen mid-aisle. Rob closed his eyes. "The morning your suppliers were paid," Rob said quietly. "You were the one?" Michael nodded. "Yes." Rob opened his eyes again. "But there was more, Rob said." Michael frowned slightly. "More?" Rob hesitated. He reached beneath the counter and pulled out the old ledger. He placed it gently on the counter between them. Michael stared at it. This, Rob said, is why I know you weren't the whole miracle. He opened the ledger. Every page still bore the same impossible testimony. Paid. Jay. Michael's face drained of color. That's not accounting, he whispered. No, Rob agreed. It isn't. Rob told him everything. The knock. The food. The return. The questions no one should know. The light. The scars. When he finished, Michael sat down heavily in the nearest chair. I thought God used me, Michael said quietly. I never imagined. He did use you, Rob said gently. But he did more than that. Michael stared at the ledger for a long moment. My son told me you gave him food without asking anything in return, he said. I thought that was the miracle. Rob smiled faintly. It was, he said. Just not the only one. Michael reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. I didn't come here just to explain, he said. I came because I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't finished. He slid the envelope across the counter. Inside was a check, a large one. $200,000, Michael said. Not charity, investment. Rob pushed it back gently. I don't need... You do, Michael interrupted. Not for yourself. For what this place has become. Rob looked around the store. At the people. At the shelves. At his children. I'll only accept it under one condition, Rob said. Michael nodded. Name it. That we never stop opening the door, Rob said. No matter how big this gets. Michael smiled, relieved. That's why I brought it, he said. They shook hands. And in that moment, Rob felt the same quiet certainty he had felt 3 years earlier. God was still working. Sometimes through light. Sometimes through ledgers. Sometimes through a man who simply listened when mercy knocked. The second store didn't open with balloons. There was no ribbon to cut, no speech, no crowd. Just a set of keys sliding across a worn countertop and a quiet prayer whispered before the door was unlocked. The location was smaller than Hales Market, older. The kind of place most investors wouldn't touch. Tucked between a closed laundromat and an auto shop with a rusted sign, Rob chose it on purpose. This is where it's needed, he said. Michael didn't argue. They kept everything the same. The shelves, the prices, the policy. A small sign near the door, handwritten again. Credit is given to the hungry. Nothing else. The first week, almost no one came in. The second week, a few regulars appeared, people who lived nearby but had learned not to expect much from places like this. On the third week, a woman stood outside the door for nearly 10 minutes before entering. She was holding a toddler on her hip. The child's jacket was too thin. I heard, the woman began, then stopped. I heard you help people. Rob nodded. We do, he said. She swallowed hard. I can't pay today. Rob smiled gently. Come in, he said. The ledger opened again. Not the old one. A new one. Names filled its pages slowly. And something remarkable happened. Again. People began to show up, not just to take, but to give. A local bakery dropped off bread twice a week. A mechanic fixed the delivery truck without charging. A retired teacher volunteered afternoons to help kids with homework in the back room. No one asked them to. They just stayed. Within a year, there were 3 stores. Not franchises, not chains. Communities. Each one run the same way. Each one with its own ledger. Each one with the same quiet rule. If someone is hungry, the door opens. Rob spent less time behind counters now and more time listening. He listened to stories. To people who had slept in cars. To parents who had skipped meals for years. To teenagers who didn't believe in much of anything anymore. He never told them about the light. He never explained the ledger. He simply listened. And when they asked why he did it, why he kept trusting when it didn't make sense, he answered honestly, because someone trusted me first. Emma graduated 2 years later. Medical school. She cried when she got the acceptance letter, not because she doubted herself, but because she remembered the night she almost believed it was impossible. "I want to open a free clinic," she told her father one evening. "Right here." Rob nodded. "I know," he said. "That's why this matters." Ethan studied business, but not the kind that measured success only in profit. He learned supply chains, logistics, margins, and then asked harder questions. What if businesses were judged by how many people they lifted? He asked once. Rob smiled. That's the right question. By the 5th year, Hales Market had become Hales Markets. Plural, 5 locations, 5 doors, 5 places where hunger didn't automatically mean shame. Rob kept one habit unchanged. Every December 31st, no matter how busy the year had been, he closed every store early. At 6 o'clock, trucks rolled out again, bigger this time, 3,000 boxes, each one packed by volunteers who knew exactly why they were there. Rob walked alongside them as they delivered. Sometimes he recognized faces, sometimes he didn't. Sometimes the door opened to laughter, sometimes to tears, and sometimes just silence. But every time, Rob felt the same quiet assurance. This was still the work. One night, after the last delivery, Rob stood alone outside the original store. Snow fell softly. The street was quiet. He looked up at the sky and whispered a simple prayer. "Thank you for trusting me with this." The answer didn't come as light, or sound, or words. It came as peace, the kind that settles deep and stays. Years later, when people asked Rob Hale when everything changed, he never mentioned the money. He didn't talk about the ledger, or the register, or the expansion. He talked about the door. "It was cold," he would say, "and I was tired." That was how he always began. Because when Rob looked back now, he understood something that had taken him a lifetime to learn. Miracles don't begin with light. They begin with choice. The choice to open a door when it would be easier to close it. The choice to give when you are already empty. The choice to see a person instead of a problem. Hales Markets continued to grow, but not endlessly, not recklessly. Rob never wanted an empire. He wanted faith to remain practical. Every store followed the same rules. No shaming, no pressure, no conditions. If someone was hungry, they were fed. That was it. People often asked him if he ever worried about being taken advantage of. Rob would smile. "Of course," he'd say, "but I worry more about missing the moment when love is required." In quiet evenings, after the last customer left and the lights were dimmed, Rob sometimes stood behind the counter of the original store. He would run his hand over the wood, worn smooth by years of use. This was where it happened. Not where the light appeared, but where the decision was made. Emma opened her clinic the year she finished her residency. A modest space, sliding scale care. No one turned away. A small sign hung near the door. "If you are sick, come in." Ethan helped design the supply systems for the stores, ensuring food never went to waste and help never stalled because of inefficiency. He believed deeply in systems, but only ones that served people, not numbers. On the anniversary of that night, every December 1st, Rob still closed the stores early. Volunteers gathered, boxes were packed, doors were knocked on, and every year, someone would ask him the same question. "Do you ever regret it? Giving food to that man when you had almost nothing?" Rob would pause. He always paused. Then he would answer the same way. "I thought I was giving my last $45, he'd say. "I thought it was the end." He would look at the people around him, his children, the volunteers, the families. "But it turned out," he would continue softly, "it was the beginning of understanding something the world forgets. That love is never wasted. That mercy always echoes. That heaven pays attention when we don't look away." Rob never saw Daniel again. Not the way he had that night. But sometimes, standing near a door as someone hesitated outside, gathering courage to knock, Rob felt the same presence, the same quiet question hanging in the air. "Will you open it?" And every time, without hesitation now, Rob answered, "Yes." because he had learned the truth that changed everything. That night, he didn't just give food to a stranger. He gave food to Christ, and Christ paid every debt that mattered. Not just the ones written in ledgers, but the ones written in fear, shame, and despair, the ones no amount of money could erase. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. How many doors have we walked past, not knowing who was standing on the other side? How many miracles are waiting? Not for power, not for wealth, but for obedience? If you believe that faith still walks among us, that heaven still meets us in ordinary places, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Heaven Walks With Us. Share this story with someone who needs hope tonight, and in the comments, tell us, have you ever opened a door when it cost you something? Your story might be the miracle someone else is waiting for. Because the truth is simple. The door never really closed. We just have to choose to open it.